Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and welcome to this video. This is going to be my DOM Masterclass 2022. So it's another version of Introduction to DOM, to the Document Object Model. I've done a few of these, but I always like to do a new one every once so often because I feel like I can maybe just do it a little bit better. But let's start off with what is the Document Object Model? Basically, with the document object model, it's a way that your JavaScript can communicate with what's going on in the browser. So essentially, when you look at a browser and a browser reads an HTML page, it is breaking it down to all these pieces. So like right now, this is my website, devnursery.com. I have to update it. I haven't been updating this in so long. But again, if you want to find all my tutorials, they're going to be here. So you can go to video tutorials to find more of my HTML, CSS, or JS tutorials, or literally all sorts of different languages and cool stuff. Okay, so you can find that there, along with cheat sheets, blog tutorials, and more. And again, of course, join the Slack and Discord community. But this page itself is a document object. So basically, the document, that word document, when it comes to the browser, represents the HTML file you're currently viewing. So I'm currently, some sort of HTML file was loaded and opened in this browser. So if I were to open up the inspector, so I can right click and open up inspect, open up the dev tools, see what I can see though is I can see the living, breathing version of this object. So you can see here, this is what's on the page right now. This is not what's in the actual HTML file. So if I want to see what the actual HTML file is, I can go to sources and I can go look for it along the stack of all these files. So static, I can eventually find it in here. It's probably this right here. Yeah. So that's the HTML file. The reason is I did this in React. So a lot of this stuff is built after the page loads, but not particularly important. But the idea is that when all this stuff gets read, here's the actual living, breathing object or living, breathing website as is being read currently in my browser. And this is things that can be changed. So over here, if I go to open up the body and I look in here, and let's go look for that title, logo. See right there's the name Dev Nursery. I can change it to Cheese Nursery, and look, it's now Cheese Nursery. Okay, and it's not just because I made that update doesn't mean anybody who goes to this website is going to see that. That's only going to happen on my computer because I'm only editing what is currently going on in the browser on my computer. Okay, so don't think that I've just now changed the website all over the world. That's the purpose of these dev tools. They allow me to kind of explore what's going on. Because again, this website gets downloaded. When I say, hey, go take me to this website, it gets downloaded to my computer. And then essentially your browser reads all that code and runs it on your computer. So the website's really kind of existing on my computer as I use it. That's why these things are so fast. So they'd be slower if every step required it to communicate with some other computer. Cool. So in that case, I'm gonna want to let's say change things. See how I changed that to Cheese Nursery. I might want to change the colors of things. So maybe I want to change the color of that. Now let's just make this green. Okay, so I made it green. Now that's all cool. See, I can make these changes live, but I have the ability to change the document and all the stuff. Each of these HTML tags are known as a node. They're a node of the document. And I can change them using JavaScript. And that's one of the main reasons JavaScript was created for, to allow you to do these kind of interactive elements in the browser. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Okay, we're going to learn how I can make these kind of changes through JavaScript. So for that, what I want you to do is open up an empty folder in the Visual Studio Code. So again, this is not an intro to JavaScript video, so I'm assuming that you know JavaScript. If not, go head over to devnursery.com. Go to video tutorials and watch my JavaScript 101 and my HTML, CSS playlist, so that way you know that stuff. That stuff is assumed that you have some familiarity with. I'm not going to go recap all of HTML and JavaScript. Okay? Because you can go watch the videos where I do that. So that's assumed. So what I want you to do is open up Visual Studio Code, because it's going to be assumed that you have some familiarity with Visual Studio Code or some other editor that you're comfortable with. And I'm going to create a few files. So I'm going to use the terminal. I like the terminal to create the files because I can just create them faster. So I'm just going to say touch index.html file, styles.css, and a app.js. So I'm going to touch those files. So I've just created these three files here in the folder. Okay, now first thing I want to do is I'm going to set up my HTML file. Again, using Emmet in Visual Studio Code, I can just hit the exclamation point button, and then I can just click that, and like, ta-da, all my HTML boilerplate is kind of just added. That makes life a little bit easier. Now I want to connect my CSS and my JavaScript file, so I just click. Okay, I'm going to click, first let's connect the JavaScript. So I'm going to say script. I'm going to choose script source. And I'm going to choose app.js because it's in the same folder, so I can just type in app.js. Then we're going to say link. And I'm going to choose the one for CSS. And I'm going to change the file name to styles.css because that's what I have in my folder. Okay, cool. So that connects those files. So now that's the CSS file. That JavaScript file is now connected. Okay. Now, let's actually put some stuff in this HTML file. So let's put two divs. I'm going to say, so let's just make a div here. We'll give it an ID of plain. And we're going to give it another div with the ID of jQuery, and we'll come back to that. Okay, cool. And we'll just put some random text in both of them. Okay. Cool. Now what I can do is I can load this into the browser. Like if I have the live server extension installed in VS Code, which I do, what I can do is I can right click on the HTML file and open with live server. That's just going to open up in the browser, so that way we can look at it. So there it is. There's the result of the website. Nothing crazy. Now what I want to do is, let's say that I want to make that text pink, right? Let's say we want to do that. I can do that in my JavaScript. The first thing I have to do is say, like, first I have to think about what is there. So I can right click, use inspect, and I can take a look at what's on the actual HTML page by looking at this elements tab. So I can see in here there's the body and there's the two divs. So really what I want to do is I want to make this div pink, the plain div. So what I need to do is target that div. So in JavaScript, there's an object that represents the document. Again, the document is the website that's currently loaded in the browser. This document object has a function built inside of it called query selector. And what query selector does, it allows you to pass a CSS selector. So again, I'm assuming you know what that is. A CSS selector is like the way you select things in CSS to it. Okay, so I could select this in CSS. So like I could go in CSS and say, hey, I want to target that div, and say, hey, I want to target the div with the ID of plain, and I want the color to be pink. I could do that, and I'm going to do that right now just so you can see that I can do that. And see, now the color is pink. So I could do this with CSS. Okay, but what if I wanted to do it in JavaScript? I could pass that same selector to query selector and say, hey, I want to target the ID of plain. So I want to target the first element that has the ID of plain. There should only be one. I'm going to save that element in a variable. So I'm going to say const plain equals document.querySelector plain. And then now that variable should have that element. And let's just test that out. I'll hit. So always, if you're wondering, hey, does my variable actually have what I think it has? Console log it. Why not? Okay, so I'm going to console log it. I open up the console and I can see, oh, it says null. That's not what I expected. I expected that it was going to have the div. Why doesn't it have the div? Well, let's take a look at our HTML file for a moment. The way the browser reads the HTML files from one line at a time. Okay, so it starts from the bottom. So it sees, okay, hey, this is a HTML document. Got it. There's the HTML tag, so I know everything in between the HTML tag. That's the document. Okay, here's the head tag with all like my metadata. And now when I read this, notice that my script file with my script tag that reads the JavaScript file is right here. So at that point, all that JavaScript code gets read and executed. Now, does this div exist yet? No, because technically it never got there yet. I mean, it's still reading these lines here. So in that case, there's a couple ways I can solve this problem. One way I could solve this problem is I could take this script tag and move it to the bottom of my body. That was like the original old school solution. Okay, and see, now you get a different result. See, div plain. I'm actually capturing that div. I'm not a big fan of that solution because I like to have all my script and link tags in my head. because I like to know that everything that's not visible on my website, like all these external links and meta tags and all that stuff, is all in that head. So head is like my not visible stuff, my body is my visible stuff. Okay, it's easier for me to think through it that way. So what you can do, there's a couple different things you can do, is that there's an object called the window. Okay, now the window object, okay, is the object that represents the entire browser window. Okay, and what I can say is that, hey, when the window loads, like when you load, then run a function. So I can be like window.add event listener, and then say like load. Okay, which that means, hey, when the window gets loaded up, so after it's done reading the HTML file. And then I'll pass out a function saying, hey, when the page loads, do this, and then I can put this code inside of there. This should work too. And yeah, it worked. See, there it is. We can see the div. Okay, we can see that the div has been selected. That works, but this doesn't look so pretty to have to put all my DOM code wrapped in this function. Okay, not people are gonna be like, what's this whole window load? What's going on here? So there's got to be a simpler way. There is. Okay, the other option I have is I can go over here to my script tag and I can just literally just hit space and add the word defer. Okay, by adding the word to the script tag, okay, adding the word defer to the script tag, what I'm doing is I'm saying just don't run this JavaScript till the page loads. So that way it's going to make those divs before that code ever runs. Okay, so that's pretty neat, isn't it? Now, so that's one way we can like select and target an element. Okay, what if I want to make this other one pink too? So actually, first let's actually make it pink. So now that I've selected the document, we know that I have it because I console logged and you can see that I've selected the div. So what this did is it got me that div and saved it in a variable so I can like manipulate it. Okay, what happens is that in there, this variable called plain is essentially a DOM object, what's called a DOM node. And what I can do is that inside the DOM node, it has a property called style. Okay. One second. Just get rid of all these tabs. Okay. Plain dot should be style. Let's console log it, just make sure that we're getting what we think we're getting. Yeah, no, we're getting it. So yeah, it should be like plain.style, but just let's console log it just to make sure that it is what I think it is. Plain.style. And yep, good. That is what I thought it was. Okay. So plain.style is an object that has all the CSS properties. And in there, I have all the different CSS properties I would want to change. So what I want to change is the color. So I say, hey, plain.style.color, the color property, the style object, which is a property of the plain DOM node, I want to change it to be worth pink. And see, it's pink. Okay, so I can change that in JavaScript. Yay, you just saw me do it. This is all well and good. Okay, now what happened is that once upon a time, the basic pure JavaScript DOM API, like the way you would write this code, was a lot more complicated. It wasn't uniform between browsers. There was compatibility issues. So someone wrote a library to kind of like bring all that together. It's not quite as popular as it once was, but it's still heavily used because there's a lot of really good use cases. A lot of people say, well, no, everyone just does everything in React or Vue. Some people do some things, but that's not the right solution for everything. Especially for people who like to use frameworks like Laravel or Ruby on Rails or Django, they may prefer doing what's called templating with those frameworks, where they use those frameworks to actually build out the HTML pages using like PHP or Python or Ruby. But they still need some front end like JavaScript interactivity. In that case, using like plain vanilla DOM, like what I just did, and jQuery, which I'm about to talk about now, still makes a lot of sense. Okay, so when you hear people talk about like, oh, no one uses jQuery anymore or plain vanilla DOM, it's not true. Okay, there's still plenty of uses for it. Okay, not everything is a single page application built in React. Okay, so it's good to be familiar with jQuery even in 2022. So in order to add jQuery to my website, I go to code.jquery.com. And what you need to do is you want to click here where it says jQuery 3.x. I'm going to click on uncompressed and copy the script tag. Okay, and you want to make sure you put it above your other script tag in your HTML. Because what that means is it's going to load all the jQuery code first before it runs your code. So I'm going to just put that right above my previous script tag. And look at that. Okay, I got my jQuery script tag, the script tag for my JavaScript file, and then the link tag for my CSS. Okay, so now let's show you how to do the same thing, except we're going to be doing it to the other batch here. Okay, I'm going to do it to the other one. So if I go over here, okay, what I'm going to do is to select it. So what I want to do is select the jQuery one. So I'm going to say const jQuery will be called the variable because it's the jQuery div equals, and I'm going to actually prefix this with a $sign. You'll see why. A very typical convention when people are using jQuery is that they prefix their jQuery variables with a $sign. It just makes it easier to tell which are jQuery things, which are not jQuery things. Okay, because the way jQuery works, instead of me having to type this whole word document and then .query selector, that's a lot of typing. I can get to the same place by just, writing a $. So the $sign literally is a function. So jQuery packs all of its functionality into this one function that's literally just a $sign. And basically I can do the same thing where I can basically pass it a CSS selector and it's going to return me that element. So in a custom jQuery object. Okay, keep in mind that's not like a normal DOM node like we just saw a second ago, but in this special jQuery type object. So we're going to target, and I think I called it ID of jQuery, I think was the ID. Let me just check. Was it? Yep, the ID was jQuery. And let's just confirm that we have it. So let's console.log jQuery. Okay. Cool. Okay. And so you can see there, like, look at that. Okay. And notice it's not the normal DOM object that we saw before. It's a little bit different. So you see there's like jQuery.fn in it. It's a special jQuery version. And basically what it is, it's really an array of nodes. So right now we've only captured one node. It creates this array of node, but this is a special array with a bunch of methods built in. So that way we can like do changes to all of the things that we selected. Okay. It works actually really well. Basically all the functions in jQuery, they always return a jQuery object back. So you can do really, really like large amounts of chaining, which makes writing jQuery a lot of fun. Cool. Now, well, writing logs are nice. Now, nice little cool little pro tip. Sometimes it's nice to just create like a custom log function. So I'm going to do that real quick. So const log equals, I'm just going to write a function here. And we'll just say like message. Or actually what I'll do is I'll just say message. Okay. That's just gonna, so that way if I pass in multiple arguments, it'll be wrapped up into like one array. And then arrow function, and then we're gonna pass console.log. We'll just say ... message. Okay, and that's gonna just basically pass all those arguments to console log. But what I want to do is I'm gonna wrap it with a nice like little bunch of asterisks. So that way they look a little bit nicer in the console. A little bit easier to read. Okay, so there, and then plus I don't have to write console.log anymore. I can just write log. Okay, and I got this nice little log function. Just to show you an example, now I can just do this. I can be like log jQuery, and watch what I get. See? And I get the nice little asterisks above and below the message. Okay, and that just makes it easier for me to read the message. Okay, so that's neat. Okay, I'm going to just make it a tiny bit more fancy. I'm going to create a title. And what I'm going to do is make this have backticks so we can use interpolation. I'm going to inject the title right here. And I'll show you what this does. Okay, So now that I have that like that, now if I do log jQuery, I can pass in, the string of jQuery, like what I'm logging, like a little message. And see, I get a nice little nicer message. So you see I have a little title there, so I can see what the log is for, make my logs a little bit easier to understand and find like which one I'm looking for. Okay, so creating like custom log functions can sometimes be really, really to your benefit. Okay, because you can get nice, pretty logs. Okay, so enough of that. So in jQuery, I have the node. So again, there's two ways. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just grabbing the node. So if I want to change the color of this one to pink, instead of doing like this .style.color, because I'm not changing a property anymore, instead I'm going to be using a function that's built into the jQuery object, I would just do $jQuery, because that's the variable where I have the node stored in. And I would do .css and say, hey, I want to change the color to pink. Oh, that should be a string. Pink. Okay, and see now they're both pink. Okay, see, easy as that. Okay, so again, anything you can do in jQuery, you can do with JavaScript. jQuery generally, even though JavaScript has been simplified quite a bit and made a lot nicer when it comes to DOM, jQuery still like offers you some really nice tools when it comes to working with the DOM. Which, if you're not using React or Vue for a particular project, bringing in jQuery can sometimes be very, very nice and fun and pleasant. Okay, so here we just selected. So for these first two, we selected an element, meaning we just targeted a particular thing that was on the DOM, the divs, and changed the color. Okay, another way I could have done this. So let's say, so I'm going to comment out these two properties here. But another way I could have done this is, let's say we create a class that would make them pink. So let's see here, like we'll call it .pink. And then if you have this pink class, the color of your text is pink. Okay, actually let's make it green. So that way it's a different color so you can see the difference. Green. Okay, so there's a CSS rule. So instead of me directly changing the styling through JavaScript, I'm going to change the classes on that node. So with plain, again, that represents plain vanilla JavaScript. So anytime I do something to that plain variable, it's because I'm doing it in plain vanilla JavaScript. Anytime I do something with the jQuery variable, that's because I'm doing it in jQuery. So if I want to change the CSS style to it, what I could do is I would just do this. I would do plain dot, I think it's actually dot class list, and then dot add. And then I would just say I want to add green. And see, that adds the green class to it, which I can now see in the here. So you can see like the class of green got added to it, even though it's not in my HTML. Again, if I go back to my HTML file, nowhere do I see green in that div. But it is here because I just added it with JavaScript. Okay, that code ran when the page loaded, made the change. And I can do the same thing with jQuery. Okay, I could just, but it would just be like jQuery dot add class. Okay, and then I would add green. And there it goes. Okay, so simple as that. Okay, so you can see it's not so bad. You just have to know, once you the main trick is being able to know what you want to grab and then just make the changes you want to make to it. Okay, it just really comes down to do you appreciate what your HTML is doing and the structure of your website? If you understand that, applying this JavaScript stuff to it is really not that bad. Okay, so good on that. And again, I can change any property like that. Okay, so I'm gonna comment that out. So the next thing we're gonna talk about is how to add an element. So what we want to do is we're going to add a button with some text. Okay, add a button with some text. So there's a few ways we can do this. Okay, so first I'll show you with plain. So in that plain div, we're going to add a button below the text, and it'll say cheese on it. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we're going to create a variable to hold our new button. Okay, so there's our variable. Then we need to create the button. Document.createElement. That's, we're creating a DOM element. and the element is called a button. Okay, whatever HTML tag you want to create. So that creates it. You don't see it on the screen because I created the node, but it's not attached to the DOM. It's like I created something. It's like if I have like a Christmas tree with a bunch of ornaments, just because I created an ornament doesn't mean it's on the tree yet. I have to append it to the tree. I gotta like attach it to the tree so it's visible. Okay, so that's always the next step. But first let's put some text on it. So I can be like button dot inner text, and then say the text equals cheese. Okay, and now I can append it. So I can just say like, what you would do is I'm going to attach it to plain. So I'll say plain dot append, which means you want to attach something to it. You could also do append child. And then I'm going to append button to it. And see, there it is. The button's been appended. Now you can see the button showing up there because, again, all this code is now running every time the page loads. It's creating the button, changing the text of the button, then attaching the button. Okay, so that's how it would look like in just normal JavaScript. Now, if I were to do the same thing in jQuery with that jQuery div, okay, first I would do is I would say const, and again, $sign button, because it's a jQuery thing. But instead of having to write document, .create element, I can just do $sign. So far, this looks pretty small, and then I just write, kind of like before I wrote like a CSS selector. Here, what I do is I use the angle brackets that I wouldn't bring like an HTML tag, and say like angle brackets button. And when it sees the angle brackets, it knows that I'm creating a new element. So whenever it sees these angle brackets, it knows, okay, hey, Alex, you're creating something new. And whatever is in here, that's the kind of HTML element you're creating. So now there's a new button inside there. Okay. And now I can take the button and change the text using this like text function. So that's a lot easier. I hit cheese, and then I can append it, $sign jQuery. Okay, and then .append. That's the same. Then I attach the button to it, and then you see the button. Okay, so like that's the difference between like how you create, again, how you're creating an element, then changing the text of it, and then attaching it to the DOM. Okay, everything is step by step. Again, when you're working with just plain JavaScript, everything is very imperative. Okay, it doesn't know where you're trying to go with things. So if you ask it to make you something, it'll make it for you, but then you have to remember to go like attach it to where you want it to be visible. Okay, it's not assuming anything for you. There's nothing declarative about this. Okay, that's why you have things like React. If you need sort of a declarative abstraction where you kind of like say, hey, this is what I want, and it does it for you. Okay. Okay. Cool. Now, what if I want those buttons to like do something if I click on them? Okay, so we want to add an event. So let's talk about adding events. Okay. So what I can do is I'll say, hey, you choose the thing that you want to add the event, which is first we'll do the first button. And in plain vanilla JavaScript, it would be add event listener. Okay, add event listener. You saw this earlier. And the first argument is a string representing what event you want to trigger. So you can see there's like a lot of different possible events. I'm not going to go over all the different types of events. 90% of the time, it's probably going to be like a click. So you're saying, hey, when you click this button, and then the second argument is a function. And whenever you click that button, this function will run. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll say, hey, whenever you click this button, what I want you to do is, let's say, we'll target the button. We're going to change the color of the button. Say button dot style dot background color. And notice I wrote background color camel case. So even though like CSS, I would write background color like background dash color, anything that's like kebab case with a dash in CSS becomes camel case in JavaScript. So style.background color equals, we'll say, brown. Okay, and that's what happens. So whenever I click, so what this does, it says, hey, whenever this button gets clicked, because the variable has a button inside of it, whenever this button gets clicked, trigger this function, and what does this function do? Changes the background color of the button to brown. So let's try it out. So if I click on this, and see it became brown. Okay, So basically the event responds to the action. And that's typically where you're going to use DOM stuff. Basically, you can have like buttons on your website and you want stuff to happen. Maybe things to change colors after a button click. You're not going to do all your styling in JavaScript necessarily. You'll still use your CSS for how the page is initially. But the idea is that you may want things to change after the page loads, and that's where like a lot of this JavaScript DOM stuff really kind of comes in, where you're making events happen. Now to do the same thing in jQuery, maybe like jQuery dot, no, I mean actually the button would be button, $button, dot on, because the $button variable is the one with the jQuery button. And then again, every time you see the $, that's jQuery, no $, it's normal JavaScript. Again, that's not actually like a built-in thing, it's just a convention. $button dot on, and again, same thing, just like, okay, what event, click, and then a function. But you see, it's just a lot less typing. Like that's the beauty of like of jQuery. It allows you to do what you can do in JavaScript. It's just less typing. Okay, and then in this case, I would just do like button.css, and actually it has got to be $button. So I want to target itself. $button dot CSS, and then I want to target its background color, and I want to target, and here I write it normal way because basically I'm passing a string, and then jQuery will figure out, jQuery will know what I mean. So background color, and I want to make, in this case we'll make the background color like red. Okay, and let's see if it works. So if I click on the first button, it turns brown. Click on the second button, it should turn red, and it turns red. It works. Okay, so you can see like just this using jQuery, whatnot, isn't too tricky. Nothing particularly crazy at it. Now, I'll kind of leave it at that. There's a lot more you can do. And I do have a lot of videos. If you head over to devnursery.com and you go to the HTML CSS playlist, there's a lot of videos I have where I can go even more in detail with all the cool things you can do with the DOM. Just look through the playlist, lots of stuff. But, just wanted to kind of get this video out of the way just to kind of really kind of lay down those foundational steps. And, yeah, my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy it. Also, there's a really cool blog post. So if you head over to devnursery.com, or you can just go straight to the blog, toots.alexmercedcoder.com. And if you do a quick search, just do a Control F and then search for DOM. You'll find there's like this really nice cheat sheet that shows you like all the DOM commands side by side, jQuery or plain vanilla for different situations. Okay, so you can try more stuff out, keep learning more DOM. I'll put a link to that in the video description. But either way, have a great day and enjoy.